This is a Nintendo 3DS XL charge port replacement. This is the 3DS XL. And we'll just take a wee look under the microscope at the charge port as it is, and you can see that one of the pins is damaged. And from the look of it, somebody's been wiggling the charger about a bit, trying to get it to connect. And they've actually opened up the housing a wee bit. So we need to remove that and replace it. I have a good charge port, which is off a scrapped unit that I'll use and put on its place. So to start, we'll need to remove the back panel, which is simply these two screws. Panel flips up and out. There we go. We'll remove the battery. We'll also remove the SD card. And we'll go ahead and remove the bottom screws. These are all just standard Phillips. We have a small screw in the center, and we've got two screws along the top edge, which, interestingly enough, should both have wee feet on them, but only one remains, so we'll take it off and keep it to one side. And we'll remove the final screw. Take a look around the edges, make sure there's nothing damaged, nothing we need to be careful of. And I'll edit this bit out. And I'll just use a tool just to get in and open up the edge, plastic clips, and remove both the left and right bumper switches so we can lift the rest of the case clear. This job can be done with the remainder of the board kept in the housing. You just need to be careful of the heat. So we'll take a wee look at the connector itself under the microscope. There we go, and you can see one of the pins is completely ripped off. I've sped this up after the fact because I'm removing this port entirely. I'm just going to snip as many legs off as possible with the side cutters and replace the lead free solder with leaded solder so that it comes off easier. And after removing the two outside edges, I was able to snip it off to get at the inner pins, and there we go, that's the port removed. and we just need to tidy this up. So using a bit of solder wick, we'll clean up the pads. And it really needs a bit more flux, I think. Which we'll add now. Probably clean off the pads to allow us to replace it easily. So you can see, as long as you're careful, there's no issue of damaging the plastic. Just make sure we remove all the old solder before applying the new leaded solder in its place. Since the pad's nicely cleaned up, and we'll just use isopropyl alcohol and just clean the remainder of the flux off the board and the case. And that's our board ready to receive the replacement charge port. There we go. So this is the charge port. I've removed it off a sacrificial unit. You'll see there's remnants of the old solder, but it's not damaged, so we'll go ahead and just clean off those tabs with another wee bit of solder wick, just so that we can lay it flat to the board. And there we go. That's it now, ready to put in place. And apologies for the very bad focus. Just putting a wee drop of leaded solder down on two outside pads. Line it up and melting the leaded solder on to hold it in place. Those two are the hardest two pads to get to, but you can do it quite easily with a fine tip. Now you can see it dropping down flat to the board, and we'll just tag the remainder of the pins. Just double check on the ones down at the bottom. Make sure it's lined up as well, because we don't want it on crooked. Solder on the pins. Apologies, it's out of focus. There we go. It's in focus now. So we'll go ahead and just make sure all the connections are correct. And using a wee drop of IPA, just clean off the flux. And before we put it back together, I've sped this up just to make life easy for you. Just cleaning the edges to make sure that they're clean. There's no dirt, no dust. Because the unit itself was quite dirty. And it's amazing what gets caked in around the edges here, so just go over it all, the back panel, and not forgetting the outer panel as well. So they're scraped off as much of the caked on rubbish and in around the bumper buttons, the SD card slot, just to remove any roughness, and then IPA just with a cotton bud just to finish it off. And you can see where something has obviously spilt and seeped in around the joints. So though it's not causing an issue, it's nice to be able to give it back to the customer clean. So there we go. Make sure whenever you're putting it back together, make sure you connect the shoulder buttons correctly. Nothing worse than putting it all back together, and it happens so often. We put stuff back together and then realise, oh, I forgot to connect something up. So double check that. And this one was being stubborn, but it should literally just click on, and it will in a minute. If I wasn't trying to record it, it would have all been put back together long ago. That's it in place. Check all the edges, make sure everything's as it should be before you put the screws back in. Making sure there's no obstructions, no problem, and then we'll go ahead and start putting the screws back in. Don't forget the wee small screw goes in the back by the cartridge, or the cartridge stop, and just make sure that it's well in. And we'll put the screws back in the top, and then the remainder of the screws around the body. And remember to put the wee foot back where it's supposed to be, and the SD card. Make sure it's well seated. And place the battery. And we'll just check, see the lights flashing, means it doesn't have enough charge to start. That's not an issue. And we'll just clean the back plate. You can see again, very dirty. Scrape off the roughness with a pair of tweezers. I tend to find sometimes that just makes life easier if we're using IPA. So all the caked in dirt's already been removed. Clean it off. Clean around all the edges because there's a tendency to get very dirty. Right it in, and the last two screws. That's it, job done. Thank you.